Welcome back to Tabletop Assault. I'm Ross, and today I'm going to continue my segments on analysing the Necron Codex. Today I'm going to look at Triarch Praetorians, so your sort of unit, your elite choice, which isn't really so much with your dynasty codes. These are the sort of units that I believe they keep sort of overall rule within the courts of, or the dynasties of the Necrons. And with that comes some, I want to say some benefits, but a wee bit of problems as well. But they do have their own niche and abilities that do make them different to other Necron units to a degree. But that's what we'll be analysing in this review. So how this works, I'm going to have a look at the unit in the Codex, have a look at their stats, war gear, special abilities. From there, I have a look at loadout and suggestion rules, dynasty codes where applicable, just to say, not in this one, and stratagem recommendations that might be useful. So with that, let's have a look at the Triarch Praetorians. Triarch Praetorians have movement of 10, so surprisingly quick for Necrons. Necrons usually have, infantry-based ones have usually a movement of 5, so they're getting essentially double that, making them incredibly more mobile. They have a weapon skill, bliss skill 3+, which is pretty standard for Necron infantry, Necron units in general, including their elite units. Strength and toughness 5, so slightly stronger and tougher than most Necron units, though again what you'd sort of suspect from an elite unit. 2 wounds, again what you'd expect from an elite unit, and 2 attacks. They also have a leadership of 10, which is kind of by the board when it comes to Necrons, and a 3+ save. In terms of the war gear, they are armed with rods of the Covenant, but they can change this to a void blade and particle caster, and I'll go into these a bit more detail when I go over the weapon options because there's a wee bit to discuss there. They have the standard reanimation protocols, and they'll have a purpose unshakable that the unit automatically passes morale tests. One thing that's also important to note is they do have the fly rule. So a couple of important things just to mention there is that obviously being immune to morale is quite useful. Certainly for larger blobs, when it's like 20-man Necron warrior squads, that is almost mandatory to ensure that your reanimation protocols can go off a little bit more reliably. On a leadership 10 unit in general, that's kind of debatable, but it's still a useful ability to have, and their mobility certainly is what brings them a bit more unique and difference to them. So let's go over the loadout and suggested role of this unit. So first off the bat, let's say they have no dynasty code, which is a big pain. Depending on your loadout, this could be really, really useful, and in general probably would be. I mean, Novuk would be great. I might be a bit biased in that because Novuk is my sort of play style when I play Necrons. I like them as a combat army. It's just how I roll. But, after losing other buffs from the dynasty, keywords can be a bit of a pain. This means that they will not get My Will Be Done because they are not associated dynasty unless they're again buffed by unaligned units. I believe that's Karen, who can obviously My Will Be Done them because he does not have a code himself, a dynasty himself. Nope. So you can do it into Necron infantry, which is very, very handy for him to go along them, including his extra attack aura, which essentially would bring them 3 attacks apiece. Add on My Will Be Done, and they can turn quite scary with him buffing them. And Imhotep can do it as well, though he can't do it twice because they need to be Sutek. So those are the only ones that can help there. Also not having the bonus of a Cryptech, so they can get the extra reanimation, so they could reanimate in 4+, or the 5-up invul from Chronometron is a little bit of a pain as well. However, both those characters, well, all those characters, Imhotep included, all the characters are slow. They are essentially, I think they've got movements of 5 unless you take a Cryptech that can fly, but then you lose out on the Chronometron, you'd only get the reanimation bonus. Although saying that, all those units generally are quite slow moving, and that would negate the Praetorian sort of main advantage, which is they move 10 inches, so you'd almost be hanging back to get the auto abilities, but you can't get them, and it would negate your bonus, so it kind of makes sense. It's not the worst thing to lose, though it would be handy to have, in general, but fluff-wise, it just doesn't make sense. However, rules are rules, so we can't be upset by this. Mobility is great for them. It's just that, the things you're sacrificing this are pretty important. Not having the protection from the invul is probably the one I think is the main sort of weakness. If they could get upgraded by cryptics, that would be really, really handy. Just getting that extra invul and the reanimation bonus would be handy. But it is what it is. So let's talk about the war gear in general, because this was something I found very interesting when I was reading it. So we'll go into the particle caster and void blades. So the particle caster is 12-inch pistol, 1, strength 6, AP dash damage 1. It's nothing to write home about there. On a 10-man unit, you are just going to be putting out 10 shots at strength 6 with no AP. And I always find having no AP whatsoever is kind of detrimental. However, you do get a void blade, and the void blade is a melee weapon user, minus 3 AP and 1 damage. Each time the bear fights, it can make 1 additional attack with this weapon. So this gives you some lighter shooting, but more combat. When I say lighter shooting, you just, compared to Rod of Covenant, which has a great AP, you have none. And I think that is quite detrimental here. So in 3, this is actually a really good call. The pistol does not have an AP, which is a bit of a pain, which means it ain't going to carry so much of the weight with these guys. However, the extra attack will certainly make a difference if they make it into combat, obviously. The other advantage is that if you're in a protracted combat, you can essentially use the pistol weapon there as well as get the extra attack, so that helps as well. The other weapon is the Rod of the Covenant. Now, to summarise, the Rod of the Covenant is less strength, being strength 5, which is still not bad, but it does have the almighty minus 3 AP, so you will go through armour a lot easier, but you're also sacrificing the extra attack in combat. So here's the thing, which is better? I've always been a Rod of the Covenant guy because that's kind of what we've got on the models. Doing the shooting and the combat, kind of pretty good, instead of specialising one, doing them both evenly is what I've usually gone for. However, after looking through these, I'm almost now sort of leaning towards the particle caster and the void blade. At the end of the day, these guys will do most of their work in combat rather than shooting, and I feel this is an area where maybe you should just double down on, so that beeline for combat and hit something. The void blade will give you an extra attack, but with no weapon option, that extra attack will be helpful. And then if you need to shoot, you can. It may not be as good as the Rod of the Covenant, but it just means in combat you are going to hit a lot better. The one thing I'd say that makes them a real weakness in terms of the weapon choice is the sheer fact that none of them do 2 damage, which is kind of what you'd want from an elite-based unit like this. Mobile, targeting other elite-based units sort of, and trying to get them a bit more vulnerable and going in there and causing 2 damage apiece. I feel that is a huge weakness for this unit. Even if the Rod Covenant had a way to cause 2 damage, maybe on 6s they cause 2 damage or something, I would almost say that pushes them on. But all of them being 1 damage on such an elite and point heavy unit, I feel is a big, big weakness on this one. The other thing, obviously, having next to no access to an invul is also a rather big detriment as well. I just feel that, if you're attacked by something, you're likely only going to see the benefit of, let's say, a 5+ invul, which is kind of standard for elite-based units. You wouldn't get a benefit of that unless you were facing something that was minus 3 AP, which would bring you to a 6+ save. Then yeah, you'd see a benefit of it, but that's going to be things like Plasma, which Plasma would love to target these guys because it will absolutely cause horrendous damage. So it's not the worst thing to have no invul, unless it was like a 4/3+ invul, which would be fantastic and scary, but just not going to happen. Maybe if they had, ignore wounds and a 5+, that would give them a lot more endurance and keep going in the game, where that may be a bit too much in a toughness 5, 2 wounds, a model unit. Maybe that'd be too much, but that extra level of protection certainly I think would mitigate the fact that their damage output is actually a little bit lower than you'd suspect. So we'll speak about Dynasty Codes. Nope, there's none there. It's a bit fluffy, I guess that kind of works. Nova would be great for these, even, the Dynasty Code that gives you advance and you automatically get 6. That would be good as well to just increase the quick movement, but you don't get them and it kind of makes sense. I would say in exchange for this, they need another ability. Now, they do have obviously immune to morale, but I feel they should do something that would, similar to the Stalker, which is buff up other units around them, whether to maybe they had an aura ability to make units around them half the amount of you know, a morale test or something, you know, or half the units flee, etc. I don't know. But I just feel that Triarch Praetorians should be almost leader, or not leader, but, you know, consultant. Consultant's a terrible word for it. Some way that they augment other units around them. I just feel that if they had that sort of extra part of them, they would probably work a little bit more interestingly, though they do have that high mobility, so it kind of will counteract against the units around them. I don't know, I just feel they need something a little bit more for the sheer fact that you are giving up the dynasty codes, which is a huge detriment to the unit. Next up, stratagems is going to be, we'll speak about these in general. Solar Pulse, 1 command point. Use a stratagem after a Necron unit from your army has declared its targets in the shooting phase, but before any hit rolls are made. Pick one of the enemy units that your unit is targeting. The enemy does not receive the benefit of cover against your unit's weapons this phase. So sometimes, you know, I did say that this unit may not be so ideal in shooting. You know, the Particle Caster is not great, the Rod of Covenant is, and maybe you should double down in combat, but the -3 AP is nothing to you know, look past when it comes to the Rod of the Covenant, and it will get through armor easily. And sometimes having the unit entrenched in cover is a mighty pain. Looking at things like Devastators, etc., where you really just want to try and whittle down the amount of heavy weapons you can get. You point your Rods of the Covenant at them and kill them. This removes a bit of their their cover save, so make them easier to take down. Or things like snipers, which love their camel cloaks. Being able to mitigate cover, you know, cover may not be as huge in this edition, but sometimes it can make a heck of a difference. And I've certainly used Solar Pulse a couple of times to devastate backfield units that are highly entrenched. And I really can't fault it for 1 command point. Sometimes there's the unit you need to ensure that they don't receive cover just to maximise their casualties. And I think it's always a solid one for any range unit that does have a good AP to get through. So I think it's always one to think about. There's plenty of other units probably better for it. Necron Warriors and Rapid Fire Range, for instance. Immortals, probably. But these guys have the mobility to target units that may be a bit more harder to reach, and Solar Pulse to ensure that they don't get their cover, which can be helpful. Next up is Disruption Fields. 1 command point. Use a stratagem when an infantry from your army fights in the fight phase. Increase the strength of all models in the unit by 1 until the end of the phase. This one's sort of useful for these guys, making their strength 6 generally all round, which is okay. It'll hurt things that are toughness 5 and 6 a bit more, and toughness 3 will be shredded. But I think that's maybe a bit more overkill for things that are toughness 3. They should be hurt by these even at strength 5 enough. Generally, it's going to really depend on the target that you're after, and if you've got the command points. After all, it's only 1. But things like, you know, Lich Guard and Flayed Ones are probably gonna see this a lot more advantageous, just because the amount of attacks they get and the dynasty buffs they get as well. Strength 6 as well, I also don't think is the most defining factor for it as well. Flayed Ones, for instance, become strength 5, which is a lot better than strength 4, and Lich Guard, if they've got War Size, become strength 8, so they get a huge benefit from there. But still, there may be opportunities where you're going to go, right, I need these guys to be strength 6, and that can happen. Next up is Judgment of the Triarchs. Triarch, 1 command point. Use a stratagem before a unit of Triarch Praetorians from your army shoots in the shooting phase or fights in the fight phase. Add 1 tit rolls made for your unit until the end of the phase. Simple stratagem, but not bad. Plus 1 tit on a bunch of attacks is going to be useful. Add on if you had a full unit with Void Blades. Hitting on 2+ is going to hurt a unit pretty well. Just adding more dice to the damage. Can work in shooting as well with Rods of Covenant. That's probably it's less effective. You're probably going to get, I think math-wise says about 1.5 more if you've got a full unit of 10. I think that's how the math works. 1.52 give or take extra hits. I'd probably say if you're going with the Void Blade, then yeah, this is a much more better option. It is cheap for 1 command point, but it's all about when you get these plus to hit rolls or plus anything to your rolls, it's going to be about the volume of dice you get out of it to get the pure benefit of that command point. So that's kind of it for Triarch Praetorians. A little bit of a quick one there. Obviously I wasn't speaking about Dynasty Codes, which takes up a huge segment when discussing them. The thing that they compete with most is probably Lich Guards, and it's the difference of the bonuses you can get Lich Guard versus the mobility of the Triarch Praetorians. And I think in general Lich Guard kind of win out of this, especially when they have, I believe, dispersion shields, because that gives them protection as well as a good combat effort as well. Actually a very similar combat to them as well, except for the Void Blade. I just think that extra 4-up invul adds a huge amount of protection to a unit. Yes, they may be slow and struggle to get where they need to be. You might have some tricks like, you know, relics, or what is it called, the Nightmare Shroud, or Veil of Darkness, to get into places. But it is a toss-up between them, and I've sometimes used Triarch Praetorians and they've been absolutely great because they've got the mobility to get where they need to be. But Lich Guard generally I just find do the damage more reliably once they do get there. I certainly think this is a unit that needs to be re-evaluated if there is a Codex update. Certainly now we have into the principle of Space Marines getting their new one. As of the time of filming, that has happened. So, you know, I'm not saying Necrons anytime soon, but they'll obviously be somewhere in the next couple of year, 2 year, give or take, whatever. I think this is a unit that probably needs to be re-evaluated in terms of its role. 1 damage across the board is a big weakness, I think, for them. I think they need to have an ability that does give them a bit more damage. And they do need something, I just feel, to augment the army around them, just for their sort of fluff-wise. I think that would kinda make sense. Maybe not so much, but I feel they should be just sort of leading as like these sort of, you know, leaders of what the Triarchs do. And certainly the Triarch Stalker's ability that helps out other units is super useful. So I'd like to see that maybe shared as a common theme when it comes to the Triarch Praetorians. So the short answer is, you know, I favour Lich Guard, but Praetorians do have their access due to their high mobility as well, which makes them an interesting choice in themselves. Please, you know, let me know what you think. Comment, share, like and subscribe. Very interested to hear what people think of Triarch Praetorians. Very expensive unit for what they do. Can they bring their points worth? Let me know what you think in the comments. Also, check us out on social media where you can see the projects we're working on. I'm still working on Chaos. Working on Chaos, trying to get a good amount of them going. Need to decide what my next project is after them, because I've got a few things left to do and then I'll be moving on to something else. And also check us out on Patreon to help support the channel, bring you more content, because we absolutely love doing so. So thanks again, and we'll see you on another Tabletop Assault Battle Report.